Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What do we have here, y'all? What do we... Oh. That's Nolan right there, y'all. That's Nolan right there. I'm trying to do it slow for y'all. This one of them breeze by. You know how they do the little boomerang thing on Instagram and all. It's one of those. Y'all see that? So I want y'all to pay attention to see everybody. I'm gonna see who that is in the front. Y'all see this? That's Nolan. That is Nolan.
What if one photograph could force us to look at the final hours of Nolan Wells in a completely different way? Because that is the question now sitting at the center of this case. A new image has surfaced, showing Nolan with a much larger group of people around the time he was believed to be heading toward Horn Island. And when that image is placed beside videos, social media posts, boat photos, and the timeline that has already been discussed publicly, something becomes difficult to ignore. There appear to be more people connected to this story than the public may have initially understood. And tonight, we're going to slow this down and look at why that matters. You can hear the excitement in that clip as the creator tries to identify the people appearing around Nolan. But the important part isn't simply recognizing faces. It's the possibility that this image gives us another piece of the timeline. Because when someone disappears, the question isn't only where were they last seen, it's also who was around them, which boat were they on, when did they leave, and perhaps most importantly, who can independently account for what happened next? Before we go further, here's the full creator material that brought these questions into focus.
Oh, hey, somebody at the front of the driver. 5, 6, 7. Justice for Nolan, man. Let's get it, y'all. Look, 2 right there. Hold on.
So
2
that
up
is
there.
where
2 up there.
So that is.
Look, 2 up there. Just enjoying the breeze and shit. That's sad, man. Sad, man.
I know y'all remember this.
You have no idea who you're dealing with.
Any corruption and cover-up starts with your connections.
Ocean Springs is going to have Ocean Springs back.
And guess what town the DA lives in? Ocean Springs.
I understand the public's urgency to know what happened to Nolan, but we are not taking time for time's sake.
The Mississippi Rising Coalition recently posted this with questions on Facebook for the DA. One question, does the DA have any personal relationships with the friend's parents? And the second one, because she's involved in a lot of these local women's groups, even women's Republican groups, does she have any connection with Judge Ashley Cole? And would that be a conflict of interest? And asking if she should recuse herself from an investigation involving a child of one of her professional colleagues.
I found them. I found all the people that were on Katie's boat, y'all. Shout out to the real Jada J that turned me on to this picture. And as y'all can see, we've got a match with the necklace and the swimsuit. Think I busted out my glasses and red lipstick just for the swimsuit? Nah. Now, as I talked about yesterday, we've all suspected that this is Kendall for a while now. The identity of this curly-haired girl has always eluded us. Well, not anymore, folks. For now, I'm gonna just refer to these girls as T and L. As you can see, L clearly has the same kind of hair texture that's in the bottom of this picture. We know that these two were together on 4th of July, and T did not 1, but 2 Nolan tributes after his body was found. Now, another one of their friends had a reel, which they did a little panning video on the best 4th of July ever. And who was in that video? Well, that looks to me to be Jacob, Kendall's longtime boyfriend. So it seems confirmation to me that both Kendall and her boyfriend were on this boat the entire day. Now that I have found this group of friends, I was scouring the pictures and I found this. We've got Elle with somebody I immediately recognized because I remembered that swimsuit, and they tried to hide this picture in a document dump so you didn't know what day it was. Well, if it isn't Nevaeh. Oh, she back! She back! Same swimsuit, same belly ring, and there she is clearly earlier in the day with Kendall, clearly on the same boat. And just in case you didn't see my video on the Tube of You yesterday, or just need a reminder, here was the friend group breakdown that I had. But to me, this seemingly clearly confirms that these two were on this boat probably all day. I say this because there's another picture from the summer with Nevaeh with the little pink cup right here. You can see the pink cup in the lap of Kendall up here, along with the matching, poles and this, all of it matches. Now I want to go back to this picture because in the background there, we see somebody seemingly approaching the group to join them to go out in red shorts. And y'all know that I've been saying for a while that in my humble opinion, I believe that the person in red shorts is Warren's brother. But now I also think there's a strong possibility that it could be Lainey's boyfriend, Drew. Just as further confirmation, these glasses match the glasses that are in the Katie Snapchat. I think it's pretty safe to say that we definitely found the people that were on the boat with Katie. Now here's where it gets a little interesting to me though. Look at how late in the day this picture seems to be taken. And they clearly were still out at night. So did they drop everybody else off? Did they come back out? Got a lot of unknowns here, but I did my social media scour. And let me explain to you what I found. So we've got Elle and T on the boat with Kendall and Nevaeh, like we've confirmed that. We also know at some point Katie was on the boat with them as well. T was the only one that seemed to be connected to Nolan on social media. Now remember how the person who released the Snapchat pictures of Katie said that they were not friends with her? Well, I found that T was actually connected to a lot of people social media wise, whether they were following her or she was following them. I was able to find Javon. I was able to find Ava D, the girl from the party. I was able to find the entire Hudson family, as well as Katie, Lainey, Trin, Ava, all of the other friend group, the core group that I talked about yesterday. And I found out that Elle was either following or was followed by Ava, Jax, and Bart. Now here's the real kicker. When I went to T's Book of Face page, I found out that she was FB friends with not only Warren's mom, but Bart's mom as well, and several other adults that are close friends with that mom group. And I also found out that Lainey and Nevaeh are both friends with the older McGrath brother, but it seems like he was in Texas at the time, so most likely he was not on the boat or around for this. However, he does have a younger brother who is friends with T on social media. And that makes me wonder if the younger McGrath brother might have been on that boat. Now remember, Lainey said that she was not on Horn Island. She was with a different group of friends on a different island altogether. But now I'm wondering if this boat, this group, might have been the other group that they got into the altercation with. Because remember, they specifically said that they knew the guy, like knew of him, but they weren't like friends with him. Because does nobody else think it's weird that whoever else they were fighting on the beach hasn't come forward? Especially if they were people that didn't really know these people? But could this boat have been the fourth boat that we've seen? Because if this is the same red shorts guy, then how did he get onto the other boat?
There's a new photo in this case worth looking at closely with us. Nolan is unmistakably in it, along with considerably more people than this friend group has ever publicly accounted for together in one place, on the water, on Horn Island, the same day he disappeared. Let's get into it. Before we go further, this case has survived this long because ordinary people refuse to let it quietly disappear the way stories like this usually do. Not because a network kept it alive. Because people like whoever pieced this video together stayed up all night doing exactly that. If you want to keep being one of those people, subscribe now, because we're not stopping until this actually gets an answer.
Hey y'all, hey, I just got back in and bombshell. Why we have a photo of Nolan with Bart and a large group of people. And I'm just going to show you real quick because I have questions. Hold on, let's look. Now I have questions because from what the last thing that I heard per Warren, that Nolan was on leaving and went out to Horns Island on the Triton with Wyatt. That's what Warren said. And then how can the video that I just shared with you guys this morning, how could that be Nolan in the video when Nolan is on another dock with Bart getting ready to head out there to Horns Island? Y'all, what is going on? And then Warren, I'm so confused because how are you saying that how is that your friend? How is that your best friend, your brother from A High, and You're nowhere in the picture. What's really going on? Y'all, this is some... Yes, sister, friend, I will share a longer version. I'm going to add it to this one. But the purpose of this video, I couldn't even sleep last night because I was trying to put A, B, C together. So this picture, the video, on June the 23rd helps in a lot of ways because Warren stated in all of the videos in his interviews that they were a tight-knit group of people. And he also said that there were around 20 to 30 people scattered in those 3 or 4 different boats that they had taken, correct? Okay, so the trip on June the 23rd, per Warren, are a tight-knit group of people, would be the same people that we saw inside this picture.
I'm trying to see who it. So you got all these damn people ain't saying nothing. This is wild. 1, 2, 3. There's somebody right here in the cut. There's somebody right here. Somebody right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's somebody at the front of the driver. 5, 6, 7. Justice for Nolan, man.
So that is where I'm going with the video, because Warren, again, said that they were a tight-knit group of friends. Like, there's no outsiders in their circle. And so the same people that are on that video on June the 23rd are the same people that are in that still image on Horns Island, allegedly Horns Island, that we see here.
Look, 2 up there. Just enjoying the breeze and shit. That's sad, man. Sad.
Secret Service Sam here for a Nolan Xavier Wells update, and we have a new picture that has emerged. It is a whole group of people on the 4th of July getting onto what is believed to be Fart Jr.'s boat. But you know who's missing? Warren. Warren's missing because that's kind of weird. Maybe it's just me. Maybe a little birdie told me this. Yep, that little birdie of mine says that in Officer Race Tatum's podcast, if you can call it a shitcast, that Warren said he went out on his buddy's boat. And I thought that meant Fart Jr.'s boat, but we don't see Warren here in this picture in my Nancy Grace voice. So what is going on? I am not seeing a horse dragging this cart. Is he inside, getting White Claws, chilled out? I don't know, bro.
What you've just heard raises several separate threads, but one stands above the rest: the boats, the people connected to those boats, and the possibility that photographs taken on different days may help establish who was actually together and when. Some of the identities discussed in the creator material remain tentative, so we're going to treat those identifications as leads rather than established facts. But the broader timeline is worth examining. According to the material presented, photographs appear to place Nolan among a larger group than some earlier accounts may have suggested. Other images appear to connect members of that group through clothing, jewelry, social media relationships, and appearances on the same boat. Individually, those details may seem small. Together, they could become important, because photographs have something memories don't always have: a timestamp, a location, a visible group of people, and sometimes a detail that wasn't supposed to become significant until much later. That's what makes this new photograph so interesting. If Nolan was pictured with this larger group around the same period, then we have to ask whether the established timeline accounts for everyone who may have been present. And there's another question. Why does the picture appear to show Nolan with people who haven't necessarily been central to the public version of the story? That doesn't tell us what happened to Nolan, but it tells us there may be more of the story to reconstruct. And that's where we're going next. We're going to follow the boats. We're going to look at the people appearing around them. And we're going to examine how the 4th of July photographs may connect to the earlier images that have already attracted so much attention. If you value careful coverage of cases like this, where we slow down, follow the timeline, and separate what is visible from what is still unknown, consider subscribing. This community has been following the details closely, and there are still pieces of this story that deserve attention. Now, here's the first major question I'd like you to keep in mind as we continue. If Nolan was with a larger group of people on or around the boats that day, can the timeline account for where each person was when Nolan was last known to be with them? Because that question becomes even more important when we look at the photographs from later that day. The creator material suggests that some people who appear connected to the boat group were still together later in the day. There are references to matching clothing, familiar accessories, and even a distinctive cup appearing in separate photographs. Those details may sound trivial, but in an investigation built around a timeline, trivial details can become anchors. A swimsuit can establish continuity. A necklace can connect two photographs. A pair of sunglasses can suggest that the same person appears in two different locations. And a boat can establish a physical connection between people who otherwise might appear unrelated. That brings us to the biggest unresolved issue from this first part of the investigation. If these photographs really do belong to the same sequence of events, how many people were actually together that day, and where was Nolan during each stage of that timeline? Because once we begin putting those photographs in chronological order, the story may look very different. And that is exactly where we're going next. And that is where the timeline becomes important. Because once we stop looking at these photographs as isolated snapshots and start looking at them as pieces of one day, a much bigger question appears. Who was actually with Nolan at each point? The creator material gives us several possible connections. There is the group associated with Katie's boat. There are photographs appearing to show Kendall, Na, Elle, and T together. There are references to boyfriends and family members who may also have been nearby. And then there is Nolan. The new photograph appears to place him within a larger gathering. That matters because one of the descriptions discussed in the material was of a relatively tight-knit group spread across several boats. If that description is accurate, then the people in these photographs may not have been random strangers who happened to cross paths. They may have been part of a connected social circle. And that gives investigators something very valuable, a network. Because when one person disappears, investigators don't simply examine the missing person. They examine the people, places, vehicles, phones, photographs, and movements surrounding that person. Now look at the 4th of July material. The photographs appear to show members of the same broader circle getting onto a boat. One detail immediately stands out in the creator's analysis. Warren does not appear in that particular image. That by itself doesn't establish anything suspicious. People move between boats. People arrive at different times. Someone can be inside a boat, out of frame, or simply somewhere else. But when the photograph is compared with statements about who was supposed to be together, the absence becomes a question worth asking. Where was Warren at that moment? And if he was elsewhere, when did he join the group? These are the kinds of questions that can turn a collection of social media photographs into an actual timeline. And there is another complication. The creator material raises the possibility that one person seen in red shorts could have been either Warren's brother or another person connected to the group. That identification remains uncertain. But if that same person appears in another photograph or video, the uncertainty becomes something investigators could potentially resolve through better images, timestamps, or witness accounts. This is why we have to be careful with facial identifications. A blurry photograph can suggest a possibility. It cannot by itself establish someone's identity, but it can tell us where to look next. And there is one particularly interesting lead involving social media connections. The material describes one person, referred to as T, as being connected online to several members of the wider group, including adults connected to some of the families. Other members of the group were also reportedly connected to people in the same social circle. Again, that doesn't prove what happened to Nolan, but it does make the idea of a completely disconnected group less convincing. These people appear to have overlapping relationships. And when relationships overlap, timelines become easier to investigate. You can ask, who knew whom? Who contacted whom? Who was together before the trip? Who was together afterward? And who may have known something about Nolan's movements? That's also why the question about the other boat becomes so interesting. The material raises the possibility that another group may have been involved in an altercation on the beach. If there really was another group involved, then identifying those people could potentially help establish what happened before Nolan disappeared. Were they strangers? Were they acquaintances? Were they connected to the same social circle? And if they knew the people involved, why haven't they become a more visible part of the public timeline? Those questions remain open. But there is something else we need to remember. The photographs we're examining may have been taken at different times. A person appearing in one photograph does not automatically mean they remained with the group for the rest of the day. A boat can leave, someone can be dropped off, another person can join, a group can split and later reunite. That means the real goal isn't simply to identify everybody. It's to establish when they were there. And this is where timestamps could become incredibly important. If investigators can establish the original metadata for photographs and videos, compare them with phone records, boat movements, messages, or witness accounts, individual pictures could become points on a much larger map. For viewers following this case, I want to ask you one specific question. When you look at the photographs discussed so far, which detail would you prioritize for building the timeline? The people, the boats, the clothing, or the timestamps? Put your answer in the comments. And if you're watching from somewhere outside the area, tell us where you're following this case from. Because sometimes someone watching from hundreds of miles away notices a detail that everyone close to the story has overlooked. And there is one more reason this timeline deserves attention. The creator material suggests that Nolan's movements may have been described differently depending on which account we're looking at. If one account places him leaving with one person, while photographs appear to place him with a larger group around the same period, then those pieces need to be reconciled. Not through assumptions, through sequence. What happened first? Who was present? Which boat was involved? When did Nolan leave one location? And who was with him when he did? Those questions bring us to the next stage of the investigation. Because the photographs may tell us who was around Nolan, but they may not yet tell us what happened after he left. And that's where the story becomes much more difficult and much more important to reconstruct. If you've been following this case and haven't subscribed yet, consider joining us. Because the next part takes these photographs and moves from identifying the people to examining the gaps between their movements. And one of those gaps could be more important than it first appears. And this is where all those photographs, boats, and social media connections come together. Because the biggest question may no longer be simply who was on the boat. It may be what happened between the moments we can actually see. We have photographs that appear to place Nolan with a larger group. We have material suggesting several people were moving between boats. We have photographs from later in the day that appear to show members of the same wider circle together. And we have accounts describing Nolan's movements that viewers are now trying to place against those images. But there is a gap between a photograph and what happened immediately afterward. And that gap is where the unanswered questions live. Let's take the boat issue first. If there were several boats carrying people from the same social circle, then Nolan could potentially have moved between locations without appearing in every photograph. Someone could have boarded one boat, left it, joined another group, and later returned. That means we cannot simply look at one picture and assume it represents the entire day. The timeline has to be built piece by piece. And that is why the original photographs and videos matter so much. A screenshot copied from social media may tell us what someone looked like. The original file could potentially tell us when it was created. A video may show only a few seconds, but those few seconds could reveal who was standing nearby, what boat was visible, or whether the group was still together. The same principle applies to the people. Several names and identities have been suggested in connection with the photographs discussed by the creators. But a suggested identification is still a lead. If investigators can establish the identity of every person visible in the relevant images, they can begin asking a much more useful set of questions. Who arrived first? Who left? Who stayed? Who changed boats? Who was with Nolan immediately before his last known movement? And who can independently confirm those movements? Those are questions that photographs alone cannot answer. But photographs can tell investigators exactly where to begin asking them. There is also the question of the alleged beach altercation. The creator material raises the possibility that another group may have been involved. If that event occurred, identifying the people involved could be extremely important, not because it automatically connects them to Nolan's disappearance, but because witnesses to an argument or confrontation may have information about what happened immediately beforehand. And that brings us back to something easy to overlook. Sequence matters more than individual details. A red pair of shorts by itself means very little. A familiar pair of sunglasses means very little. A pink cup means very little. A social media connection means very little. But if several of those details independently place the same people together during the same period, they become useful pieces of a larger reconstruction. That is the difference between a photograph being interesting and a photograph becoming evidence worth investigating. And there is another detail that deserves attention. The creator material repeatedly returns to the question of whether the public account of the group was complete. If the people involved really were part of a tight-knit circle, as described, then there should eventually be a way to reconstruct that circle, not through speculation, through records, photographs, messages, phone data, boat movements, witness statements, and the original versions of the videos that have circulated online. Those sources could either strengthen the emerging timeline or reveal that some of the assumptions being made from social media are wrong. Either outcome would be useful, because the goal isn't to force the evidence into one particular story. The goal is to find the sequence that the evidence actually supports. And that is also why Warren's reported account deserves to be placed carefully beside the photographs. If he described Nolan leaving toward Horn Island with a particular person, then the question becomes whether the photographs and other available material support that sequence. If they do, we have one clearer timeline. If they don't, then investigators have a discrepancy that needs to be explained. A discrepancy isn't automatically evidence of wrongdoing. Sometimes people remember events differently. Sometimes they describe only the part they personally witnessed. Sometimes photographs capture moments that a witness didn't know were important. But when the discrepancy concerns the last known movements of a missing person, it deserves attention. And this is where the case currently leaves us. The new photograph may have expanded the number of people we need to consider. The boat photographs may help establish relationships. The social media connections may help identify those relationships. And the timeline may ultimately tell us which of these details matter and which ones don't. For everyone following this case, this is the moment when patience becomes important. We don't need to decide who is responsible based on a blurry photograph. We need to determine what happened, in what order, and who can account for each stage. Because the most important photograph may not be the one showing Nolan surrounded by people. It may be the photograph or video that shows what happened immediately afterward. And if another piece of original evidence emerges, one with a reliable timestamp and a clear view of the people or boats involved, it could answer a question that has remained unresolved throughout this investigation. Where was Nolan, and who was with him at the final point before the timeline goes dark? That is the question this entire investigation keeps bringing us back to, and until that question is answered, there is still a story to follow. If you've been here through all three parts, thank you for staying with the details and keeping the discussion respectful. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final question. Which unanswered part of the timeline do you believe deserves the closest attention? The boat movements, the people identified in the photographs, or the accounts of Nolan's final movements? Share that respectfully in the comments, and take a moment to read what other viewers have noticed as well. Sometimes putting several careful observations together reveals a connection that one person alone might miss. And if you want to continue following this case as new information emerges, subscribe and stay with us, because this story may not be finished. And sometimes, the smallest missing piece is the one that finally makes the entire timeline make sense.